I've been reminded lately of the power of words. I feel like everywhere we look, we're reminded of the power of words for good and for ill. The way that words are used in media and social media, in politics, in sports, football, tennis. Who knew? Tennis. And I'm reminded of how often we use words to harm, how we embed insults within compliments or use words to assert power or sometimes to mask power. It's not an accident, Chevra, that when we do the vidui, 1/3 of the confessional prayer is about the words that we say or the words that we don't say. But this is Rosh Hashanah, it's not Yom Kippur. And so we're not yet at Al-Chait, and we're not yet at all of our sins. We're just about who are we in this moment as we stand at the head of a new year, as we look into 5779. How do we think about the sort of people that we want to be, the sort of community that we want to be? And when I think about Rosh Hashanah this year, and I think about this community, I want to ask us to do two things when it comes to words. One of them is to pay close attention to the words that we say to one another. In this Kila Kedoshah, in this sacred congregation, between and among your co-congregants, in your families, in your places of work, in your schools. I want us to pay attention to our words and how they affect people. And the second thing is that I want to refocus as a congregation on our learning. This is going to be a big year for Beth Am. You're going to hear more about that on Yom Kippur. But one of the things that I'm going to try to do this year is to think about the ways that we might consider ourselves as a community and where our attention ought to be. And one thing that I really love about Kesher Shabbat services, when we're downstairs in what used to be the chapel and now we moved to the social hall because we outgrew the chapel, is an opportunity to be more informal. For me to not just give a pre-written sermon, but to give a Devar Torah or to have a discussion or sometimes to look at a source sheet together. And so what I'd like to do today is to look at some words together. And they are words about words. You should have the sheet in front of you. It said, when words become weapons. It's the story of Rabbi Yochanan and Resh Lakish. Does everybody have it? Anyone not have it? So raise your hand if you don't, and David Rothenberg, our executive director, will be happy to help you find a source sheet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us through it fairly quickly. It's one of my favorite stories. It's a haunting story. It's a tragic story. And I think in some ways it points not only to the use of words, but also to the importance of relationships and healthy relationships. So here we go. Yom Echad, Hava Kasachi Rabbi Yochanan b'Yardena. One day, Rabbi Yochanan was swimming in the Jordan. I'm not going to do the whole thing in Aramaic, but I want you to get a feel for it. Chazi Resh Lakish, v'shavar liYardena, Avtarei. Resh Lakish saw him and leapt into the Jordan after him. Now, first of all, there's a couple of things you need to know about these two characters. Rabbi Yochanan was known for being extraordinarily beautiful. He was really nice to look at. Elsewhere, Rabbi Yochanan's beauty is described in the following way. If you were to take a new silver goblet right out of the furnace that's been newly cast, and you were to fill it to the brim with pomegranate seeds and roses, and then you were to look at that beautiful silver goblet with pomegranate seeds and roses at dusk, the light that emanates from that cup is sort of like the light that would emanate from Rabbi Yochanan. In fact, the rabbi said that he would have looked perfect but for the fact that he didn't have a beard. And so here we have Rabbi Yochanan on one hand, and on the other hand we have this guy named Resh Lakish. Now who is Resh Lakish? Resh Lakish is a brigand. He's a thief. He's a bandit. He's not a rabbi. So here's Rabbi Yochanan swimming in the Jordan River, and Resh Lakish sees him bathing, nude. If you're wondering if there are homoerotic overtones to the story, the answer is yes. But we're not going to focus on that, though. Read Boyarin if you're interested in knowing more. So Resh Lakish, he sees this gorgeous guy in the river, and he leaps into the river after him. Let's continue. Chazi Resh Lakish. Oh, I read that already. Amar le, chilcha le'oraita. He said to him, your strength should be for Torah. Amar le, shufracha le'nashe. And he, Resh Lakish, said to Rabbi Yochanan, your beauty should be for women. He, Rabbi Yochanan, said to Resh Lakish, if you return, I will give you my sister, who is more beautiful than me, in marriage. He, Resh Lakish, accepted the terms of the arrangement. And then Resh Lakish tried to go back, and this is important. Think about this for a moment. He tried to go back. Bai lemahadar la'atuye me'aneh velo matzeh hadar. He tried to go back across the river to collect his weapons, because of course he's a thief, he's a robber, he's a no-goodnik. But he wasn't able to go back. And so think about that for a moment. Here we have this meeting of two people, naked as the day they were born, in a place that is no place. Right? It is no man's land. Quite literally, the Jordan River is a boundary. It's a border river. Right? It's a space between two pieces of land. And here they are in the river, nowhere, totally unarmed, strength and beauty. What my teacher Ruth Calderon says, mafia and academy. And here's Resh Lakish, and he agrees to marry Rabbi Yochanan's sister, and he agrees to become a student of Torah. And then he maybe has second thoughts, and he says, you know what, maybe I'll just go back for my knife. And he can't find his way back, right? You can't go home again. And so here they are, these two guys who have just met, and they're going to go on a journey together. Rabbi Yochanan taught him, that is Resh Lakish, I'm on number 2 now. He taught him Torah, he taught him Mishnah, he taught him scripture and the oral tradition, and he made him into a great man, a Gavra Rava. Now it's an interesting question. What kind of man was he before? Well, maybe he wasn't so great. We'll see. But the text is going to tell us that he made him into a great man. And then many years pass. It seems probably decades pass. Because we've now moved from the beginning of their relationship and the master teaching the student to now the two have become chavruta. They've become study partners. And they're learning together one day and it all goes off the rails. One day they diverged in the Beit Midrash, the house of study. The sword and the knife and the military spear and the hand sickle and the harvesting sickle, from when do they acquire tumah? That is ritual impurity, from the time when their production is complete. So we have a statement that is assumed and accepted by all of the people in the room that different kinds of implements, right? Implements of war or implements of just trouble, with a capital T that rhymes with T and that stands for pool. Those implements, we're not talking about kashrut now, but it's kind of like that, right? They can take on tumah and ta'ara, or they can take on impurities, and they can be purified. And they have to, sort of like kashrut, if you've ever kashered a pot, for Pesach maybe, what do you do to kasher the pot? You put it in boiling water, you expose it to heat, right? But after you do that, you then take it and you plunge it in cold water, because the rabbis understood that heat transfers. And so if you take it when it's hot and you've now purified it or koshered it, and you put it on a surface which is not kosher or is impure, then the pot is going to again take on the impurity. So you want to put it in the cold water to kind of seal its status. And the question that they're talking about, which you'll see is not about the question that they're talking about, is about when that actually happens. Does it happen at the moment when you heat the implement, the knife, or does it happen at some other point? It's okay, it's just an imaginary knife. And when Rabbi Yochanan said, from when they are tempered in the furnace, he says when you heat them up, that's when they're finished. And Resh Lakish says, from when they are polished in the water, from when they're completed. So until here, okay, great. This is one other machloket, one other disagreement between two study partners in the Beit Midrash, which is filled with disagreement. That's the whole point of the Beit Midrash, is people arguing back and forth together, constantly trying to come up with what is the answer, what is the truth, what is the accepted law. And then Rabbi Yochanan says something devastating. He says to Resh Lakish, you who think that it's completed when you put it in the water, aha! The sata belistiyuta yada. A thief knows all about the tools of thievery. You should know. Takes one to know it. And all of a sudden, the relationship, which is a familial relationship, remember Resh Lakish married Rabbi Yochanan's sister, which is a relationship of teacher and student, which is a relationship at this point of equals, two brilliant rabbis, is called into question. He, Resh Lakish, said to him, Rabbi Yochanan, oh yeah? And how have you benefited me? Hatam Rabbi Karuli. There they called me master. Hacha Rabbi Karuli. Here too they call me master. You know something? You didn't need to pull me out of the Jordan River to make me into a master. I was really good at my trade before. Thank you very much. I was a darn good thief. What has all of this been for anyway? And all of a sudden we start to realize that the words that Rabbi Yochanan used against his study partner are equal to the weapons that they're discussing in the Beit Midrash. His words have become weapons, and they wound, and as you'll see, they can even kill. He, Rabbi Yochanan, retorts back to Resh Lakish, I have benefited you by bringing you under the wings of the Shekhinah. You were nothing before you met me, he says. You were naked and alone, and you were on a bad path, and I pulled you out of the river, and I rescued you, and I taught you Torah, and I taught you Mishnah, and this is how you thank me, to disagree with me? Who do you think you are? He reminds him of who he was. He makes him feel, Resh Lakish, like all of those years meant nothing. Remember that scene in Pretty Woman? Remember the movie Pretty Woman? Right? And there's that scene when Richard Gere's character says to Julia Roberts' character, I've never treated you like a hooker. And at that moment she says, you just did. That's the moment. Right? This is a Pygmalion story. This is a My Fair Lady story, which is exactly what Pretty Woman was. Here is Rabbi Yochanan, who unmakes and remakes a human being. Hubristically. Without a lot of humility. And now he's going to pay the consequences. Rabbi Yochanan became very upset, and Resh Lakish became weak. You have to understand that for the rabbis, they were kind of imbued as the, mythical tradition understands, they were imbued with certain powers, and really great rabbis were able to do things with their feelings. I'm not sure that I fit that mold, but Rabbi Yochanan did, and his getting upset can have actually cataclysmic consequences. And so he gets upset, and Resh Lakish becomes weak. And then his sister, that's Rabbi Yochanan's sister, came and cried, and she said to Rabbi Yochanan, do it, mean pray for healing. Get over it for the sake of my sons, your nephews. And he said to her, he quotes Jeremiah back to her, leave your orphans, I will sustain them. And then she says, do it for the sake of my widowhood. And he quotes the other part of the verse, and put your widow's trust in me. Not very hopeful, is it? So here we have a disagreement. And what is at the crux of the disagreement in the Beit Midrash? Rabbi Yochanan says, the implements are completed when you heat them. In other words, there is one thing, you do something to it, and then it cannot change. That is the way that it is. And Resh Lakish says, wait a second. No, there's a secondary experience that can change. All you have to do is expose the hot thing to water, and it's that moment that you make it what it is. Think of the mikveh. Think of the Jordan River, that boundary space, that liminal space where they met. And Rabbi Yochanan insists that he's right. He says, no, there is no really coming to become a rabbi the way I am a rabbi. You're always going to be a thief in rabbi's clothing. And he loses faith. And Resh Lakish dies. I'm now on number 4. And Rabbi Yochanan grieved over him greatly. So now's part 2 of the story. We have the encounter, and we have the teaching, and we have the partnership, and we have the chavruta. And one of the things that I learned from my teacher, Ruth Calderon, one of my teachers at Hartman last year, is that in the ancient world, in the Greek world at least, they had debate, of course, but they didn't have what the rabbis would call machloket l'shem shamayim. They didn't have sacred arguing for the sake of heaven. This idea that two people can sit together and study a text, and they can argue vociferously, and that through their argumentation, they can actually get to a better place as human beings, and they can actually get to a better solution as rabbis. And so now we have to solve for that problem, because Rabbi Yochanan has lost his study partner. He's lost his chavruta. And the rabbi said, who shall we send to ease his mind? Let's send Rabbi Elazar ben Padat, whose ideas are very sharp. He's a smart guy. He's a clever guy. We'll send him to Rabbi Yochanan, and he'll be his new chavruta. And so he, Rabbi Elazar ben Padat, went and he sat before him, Rabbi Yochanan. And every statement that Rabbi Yochanan would say, he, Rabbi Elazar ben Padat, would say to him, there is a baraita, there's a teaching that supports you. What did they send him? They sent him a yes man. Exactly. Oh, that's right, Rabbi. You're right, Rabbi. I know you're feeling sad about the loss of your friend, Rabbi. Absolutely, Rabbi. Whatever you say, Rabbi. Believe it or not, that's actually not what rabbis want to hear. And Rabbi Yochanan is devastated. He said, are you like Bar Lakisha? Are you like Resh Lakish? Bar Lakisha, when I would believe a thing, right, when I would hold in one way, he would challenge me with 24 objections. And then I would answer him with 24 answers, which led to a fuller understanding of the law. And you say there's a baraita, there's a source that supports you? I don't need you to tell me what my opinion is. I need you to tell me yours. And he went out and he tore his clothes, right? What's rending your garments a symbol of? Mourning, or grief. And he cried. And you can kind of imagine him in this moment, like wandering through the streets. Where are you, Bar Lakisha? Where are you, Bar Lakisha? And he shouted until he went mad. And the rabbis took pity on him, and they asked for mercy, and Rabbi Yochanan died. Happy New Year. So, of course, it's a tragic story, but the thing about tragedies is they remind us of the possible. What do we learn from this story? Well, for one, we learn by way of example that none of us is a finished vessel. Just as a pot or a knife or a sickle can be made pure over and over and over again, so too we, the implements of God's creation, can be remade. We too can jump into the Jordan River. We too can begin again. We too can leave behind the things in our past that we wish to leave behind and move toward a better way of being in the world. And it's a cautionary tale. This text reminds us that we need to come to relationships with humility. Think of people in your life that maybe you've judged this year a little too harshly, a little too quickly. Maybe you assumed things about them. Maybe you assumed that there were things about them that could not change that actually can. Maybe you assume things about them that ought to change that maybe you have to accept cannot. And think about the words that we use. How are words used for weapons? How do we, through overt criticism and sometimes worse, how do we, through microaggressions, hurt the people that we love, sometimes the most? How do we renew ourselves this year, 5779, so that we do a better job in our relationships this year? One way is to remember that just as words can destroy, so too words can create. My friends, one of the amazing teachings of our tradition is that God doesn't make the world with God's hands. God makes the world with words. God says, "Let there be light," and there's light. God speaks the world into existence. And then after 6 days of creating the world, whatever that means to you, on the sixth day came into existence this ridiculous creation called humanity. And then we were imbued with this godliness because we were created b'tselem Elohim, with the capacity to do what God is, which is to say, to speak, to use our words, to create, and not, hopefully, to destroy. Chevra, let's let this year be that kind of year where we use our words to build up, to build one another up, to build ourselves up, to build our communities up, to elevate our society, to not get caught up in those who want to bring it down with their words, because it's so easy. One broadcast, one tweet, that's all it takes. Let's do different. Let's be different. There is a prayer that we say on Rosh Hashanah. And it's a prayer that is evocative of that moment of God creating the world, because it reminds us that there is a being in the universe who breathes life into us and therefore calls us to account. And that prayer is Shechianu. Thank you, God, for giving us life, for sustaining us, and for bringing us to this place. Let's say it together. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu, v'kiyamanu, v'higianu, lazman hazeh. Shana tova.